When the Qualls family gathered for their yearly barbecue on a warm June evening, no one could have predicted how the night would end. Laughter, smoke from the grill, kids chasing each other in the yard. Everything seemed like any other family get-together. But beneath the cheerful noise, something darker was building, a quiet tension that would soon explode into tragedy. By the end of that night, one family member would be dead, another in handcuffs, and secrets that had been whispered behind closed doors would finally come to light. It all began on June 10th, 2023, in the small town of Orangeburg, South Carolina. The sun was dipping low over the fields as relatives began to arrive at the home of 70-year-old Loretta Qualls, the family matriarch. She'd hosted this summer barbecue for over a decade, a tradition everyone looked forward to. Tables lined with homemade food, music playing through a Bluetooth speaker, and the smell of ribs and corn on the cob of the air. Among the guests were brothers Jamal and Malik Rutledge, cousin Deshaun Merrick, Deshaun's wife Ayanna, and Loretta's niece, 22-year-old Zaria Qualls. Everyone there was connected through blood, marriage, or shared history. To outsiders, they seemed close. But like many families, appearances can be deceiving. As guests mingled, Zaria noticed something strange near the cooler at the back of the yard. Ayanna, Deshaun's wife, was standing close to Malik. Zaria couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Ayanna hand him a small envelope. Malik slipped it quickly into his pocket, shielding the motion with a tray he was holding. When asked about it later, he'd claim it was nothing, just a quick exchange. But in that moment, it caught Zaria's attention. Meanwhile, Deshaun sat quietly at a table near the porch. Normally he was talkative, funny, the kind of person who'd make sure everyone had a drink in their hand. But tonight was different. He seemed distracted, checking his phone over and over, sipping from a bottle he rarely touched. Family members later said he looked like a man who was fighting something inside him. Rumors had been swirling for weeks. Some of the family had noticed Ayanna spending more time with Malik, Deshaun's cousin, who sometimes helped him with delivery jobs. 2 weeks earlier, Deshaun and Ayanna had argued over missing money from their savings. She said it went toward bills. Deshaun wasn't convinced. The issue was never resolved, and that tension followed them into Loretta's backyard that night. As the evening went on, Loretta called everyone together for a toast, a cheerful moment meant to celebrate family and tradition. But just as glasses were raised, Deshaun suddenly spoke up. His voice was calm but sharp. "Family's about trust," he said, looking across the table. "And when that's gone, what's left?" The group fell silent. The air grew heavy. Loretta forced a small laugh, trying to move things along, and the conversation slowly resumed. But anyone paying attention could feel it. Something was wrong. Around 7:10 p.m., Ayanna announced that she needed to run to a nearby store for more drinks. She left alone in her gray sedan and came back 20 minutes later with grocery bags and an uneasy smile. Witnesses said Deshaun barely looked at her. Minutes later, Malik walked toward the back of the property, toward a small shed near the open field. Deshaun followed shortly after. What happened behind that shed would soon shatter the family forever. For a while, no one noticed they were gone. Kids were dancing near the porch, music filled the yard, and the older relatives were talking about old times. Then, around 7:40 p.m., Jamal realized Deshaun hadn't come back. He tried calling his cousin's phone. No answer. At 7:50 p.m., a single gunshot echoed through the evening air. The music stopped. For a moment, everyone froze, unsure what they'd just heard. Some thought it was fireworks, others a car backfiring. Then they heard shouting. Malik came running from the back of the yard, eyes wide, his shirt smeared with dirt. Behind him, Ayanna screamed. Something went wrong. Panic spread instantly. Loretta, trembling, grabbed her phone and called 911. Within minutes, deputies and paramedics arrived at the scene. Deshaun was found lying near the back porch steps. A gunshot wound in his chest. Blood stained his shirt, and a revolver lay just a few feet away. Malik stood nearby, shaking, his hands raised. "It went off when he grabbed me," he kept saying. "It was an accident." Ayanna was hysterical, crying and repeating the same words. It wasn't supposed to happen. Police quickly separated everyone. Witnesses gave scattered, conflicting stories. Some said they heard arguing, Deshaun shouting, accusing Malik of betrayal. Others said they just heard the gunshot. But almost everyone agreed that Deshaun had seemed angry and intoxicated that night. Officers took Malik into custody for questioning without resistance. Ayanna was taken to the hospital for shock. The revolver was identified as Deshaun's own, a .38 caliber handgun he kept for protection. By the time the body was covered and the area secured, the sun had long set. Flashing blue lights illuminated the porch as family members stood in shock, tears streaming down faces that had been smiling only an hour earlier. Investigators worked through the night. They found Malik's shirt stained with gunshot residue and Ayanna's fingerprints on several household items near the kitchen door, suggesting the argument might have started inside. They also noted something odd. Behind the shed, tucked under an old tarp, was a duffel bag. Inside were clothes belonging to Malik and Ayanna, 2 one-way plane tickets to Dallas dated 3 days later, and an envelope with more than $8,000 in cash. The discovery changed everything. What had first looked like an accidental shooting was now starting to look like something far more complicated and possibly planned. The next day, detectives began formal interviews. Malik told investigators that he and Deshaun had argued, that Deshaun came at him in anger and tried to grab the gun. Malik claimed he panicked, that the gun went off by accident. "I didn't mean to shoot him," he said quietly. "He lunged for me. It just happened." But investigators weren't convinced. They knew the evidence was already telling a different story. Ayanna's interview started much the same way. Shock, tears, and claims that the shooting had been an accident. But when detectives showed her the duffel bag, the plane tickets, and the cash, her story began to change. At first, she said the tickets were for a short trip, a way for her and Malik to clear their heads. But under pressure, her voice trembled. Finally, she admitted the truth. She and Malik had planned to leave town together. Deshaun had found out the day before the barbecue, after noticing money missing from his business account. The money, it turned out, had been transferred to an account Malik controlled. Ayanna broke down crying as she confessed that Deshaun confronted her that morning, accusing her of lying and betrayal. "He said he knew everything," she whispered. "He said he'd deal with Malik at the barbecue." Detectives exchanged looks. What Ayanna didn't realize was that her phone, which had been confiscated that night, would later reveal text messages between her and Malik discussing their plan to leave and how they'd use Deshaun's money to start over. By that point, the story was unraveling fast. The forensic results confirmed what detectives suspected. Gunshot residue tests showed high levels on Malik's right hand, proof that he had fired the weapon. The bullet's downward angle indicated that Deshaun had been off balance or possibly pushed down when he was shot. And most telling of all, Malik's fingerprints were on the gun's trigger, while Deshaun's were only on the handle, meaning Malik had control of the weapon when it fired. The evidence was stacking up, and it painted a picture of rage, betrayal, and desperation. The following morning, headlines in local papers read, "Family Barbecue Turns Deadly. Cousin Charged in Shooting." The town of Orangeburg was stunned. Neighbors couldn't believe that a tight-knit family could implode so violently over secrets and betrayal. At the county jail, Malik sat alone in a holding cell, his hands trembling, his face hollow. He asked for Ayanna over and over, but she had been placed in protective custody. Police were now treating her as both a witness and possible co-conspirator. Detectives pieced together the timeline again and again. What they uncovered painted a chilling picture. For months, Malik and Ayanna had been having an affair. It started as friendship, built on shared frustrations and late-night texts. But soon, it grew into something much darker. Deshaun had been working long hours, trying to expand his small trucking business. He trusted Malik to help with deliveries and money handling, a mistake that would cost him everything. Malik began siphoning small amounts of cash, unnoticed at first. When Deshaun found out, Ayanna lied to protect Malik, promising they would fix it. But instead, the two lovers planned to run away, using the stolen money to start fresh somewhere else. The day of the barbecue, they were desperate. Deshaun had confronted Ayanna that morning, telling her he knew everything. She begged Malik to fix it, terrified that her husband might expose them both. Malik brought Deshawn's revolver to the barbecue, claiming it was for protection. But deep down, he knew what he might do if cornered. When Deshawn followed him behind the shed that evening, the confrontation turned explosive. Witnesses didn't see it, but based on the evidence, investigators believed Deshawn accused Malik of stealing, cheating, and destroying his family. In that heated moment, Malik pulled the gun. One shot, one decision, and in seconds, it was over. The case went to trial 4 months later. The courtroom was packed, family members filling both sides of the aisle. Loretta, the grandmother, sat quietly in the front row, clutching a cross pendant, tears streaming down her face. She'd lost one grandson to death and another to a crime she could barely comprehend. Prosecutors laid out every detail: the affair, the stolen money, the plane tickets, the messages. They called Ayanna to the stand. Her testimony was the breaking point. With shaking hands and a quivering voice, she told the jury everything. "Yes," she said softly, "we planned to leave. We thought we could start over. But I didn't want him dead. I just wanted it all to stop." Her words hung in the air. Malik stared at her, his jaw tight, eyes full of guilt and disbelief. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The prosecutor leaned in and asked, "Did Malik ever tell you what he would do if Deshawn found out?" Ayanna nodded through her tears. "He said he'd handle it, that he wasn't going to let anyone ruin our chance." Those words sealed his fate. The defense tried to argue that the shooting was self-defense, that Deshawn was drunk and aggressive. But the forensic evidence, the angle of the shot, and the messages told a different story. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood, holding the verdict slip. Malik looked straight ahead, eyes glassy but resigned. On the charge of second-degree murder, the foreman read, "We find a defendant guilty." Ayanna sobbed quietly as Malik lowered his head. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Ayanna, though spared from murder charges, faced 5 years of probation for financial fraud and obstruction. She left the courtroom in silence, her life forever shattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Loretta. Her voice cracked as she spoke only one sentence. "Family is supposed to protect each other, not destroy each other." That single line became the headline across social media. Clips of the story spread fast, people online calling it the barbecue betrayal, a tragic reminder of how love, greed, and lies can turn deadly even in the closest families. Months later, the old Qualls home stood quiet. The laughter that once filled the yard was gone. The barbecue grill, still rusting in the corner, was the only reminder of that summer evening that changed everything. In one of her last interviews, Loretta said she still sets a plate for Deshawn every June, keeping the tradition alive, even if no one shows up anymore. As for Malik, he spends his days in a prison cell, writing letters no one answers. And Ayanna, she moved away, changing her name, trying to forget the night when love turned into something unforgivable. The tragedy of the Qualls family isn't just about one bullet. It's about every choice that led to it. Every lie, every secret, every moment of silence when someone could have told the truth. Sometimes, evil doesn't come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people sitting right next to you, smiling, laughing, and waiting for the right moment to strike. This is the story of the Qualls family, a story that reminds us how betrayal can hide behind the warmest smiles, how love can twist into obsession, and how one night, one choice, can tear a family apart forever.